All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being back. I hope you enjoyed the first session. We're going to move over now to Ben Schoeman. We all know him already because Ben is one of our delegates for the 2023 Wilberforce Academy cohort. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. Ben is here in his capacity as a representative and a role player within the World Needs a Father movement. Ben, would you please just introduce yourself and tell us something about the World Needs a Father?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And it's wonderful to be with all of you today. I'm really looking forward to connecting around being unashamedly pro-family. The World Needs a Father is an international movement.
Okay.
We're way over 5,000 people like me in about 70 odd countries.
Wow.
And growing. It started in 2011 by Reverend Cassie Carstens and other founders that basically saw this need and realized they needed to do something. I'm a father of 3 children. My eldest son, Benjamin, is 15. I've got a 14-year-old daughter, Rebecca, and a little young, dynamic world changer, Gideon. The reason why the emphasis is on him is because he is currently going through a rite of passage as we speak. I'm basically preparing him for his coming of age process. So I'm trying to be very intentional as a dad. I'm also a businessman, founder and CEO of a company called Business Game Changers. We help high growth companies scale successfully. The best part of my life is my wife, Adi. She's a clinical research associate and a qualified pharmacist. So that's us.
Lovely. A family man. All right. So we're talking about the family today, of course. If we talk about being unashamedly pro-family, then we say living and promoting God's design. Obviously, the family has certain guises and ways that it presents in society, but there is a biblical pattern. And in the first session, we spoke about what is God's ideal. How did he actually mean for the family to function? And then the World Needs a Father obviously fulfills a role in South Africa, and I don't know whether it's also outside of the country on a global scale, around supporting families, taking especially fathers on that journey of taking up their roles and their responsibilities. And the context for that is, of course, that there is a need, or there's some other challenge or challenges or problems that are faced by families, by fathers. My question then, with that as context, where is the real problem? Where are the challenges and where's the need for families and for fathers?
The problem in the world is very, very clear and evident. I think from doing the Wilberforce Academy earlier this year, we all saw that there's a prolific attack on the family. Families are under pressure. We know that. In fact, research has shown that dysfunctional family life is one of the biggest problems the world battle with. And we know that fatherlessness is at the center of the problem. Look around you where you're sitting, and then think about 2 people next to you. The 2 people you've just seen likely didn't have a father on their birth certificate when they were born. A few people realize the extent. A few people realize that, for example, just in South Africa, 65% of all children born don't have a father on their birth certificate. So this is a massive problem, and it is affecting the world. In fact, the whole world is struggling with men that are deemed and labeled to be the problem. Men are now the problem. So there is a real call to all men. In fact, if you're sitting in this crowd and you're male, you are born a male, but you are called to be a man by God. And he's called us to be that and step up. But what does that look like? You know, a lot of men are told that they're a problem. They want to be different. But there are few opportunities for them to actually learn and grow through that and know what that means, given this fatherlessness epidemic.
I wonder if you could expound a little bit more on what are some of the things that live downstream, in other words, consequences of the problem of fatherlessness or of struggling fathers, which then obviously leads to struggling families, struggling children. But there are obviously a lot of things downstream from all of that. Are there some more stats and research around what it leads to?
there is an enormous problem in terms of statistics. So as you look at these statistics, I mean, it's really scary. 63% of suicides come from fatherless homes. 60 or 80% of rapists are motivated by displaced anger coming from fatherless homes. 70% of juveniles in state-operated prisons institutions come from fatherless homes. 40% of children that do not live with their biological fathers is as a result of fatherlessness. 85% of children with behavioral problems come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless children come from fatherless homes. 71% of children who do not finish school come from fatherless homes. The research have actually shown that we're seeing massive consequences coming to society. I mean, just to name a few more, let's think about poverty. Where does poverty stem from? Where does it come from? It comes from the lack of a father at home. Mom needs to work because she needs to support the family. Dad's not there, so children when they're young are with grandparents or sometimes just left at home or sometimes just hanging around. It actually breeds poverty because mom can't look after the children. Dad is nowhere. The children are being exploited, sometimes abused. It's a real massive issue. Alcohol and drug abuse, social and emotional health, mental health are affected by that. Educational achievement is impaired significantly in homes where dad is absent because the children aren't being inspired, they're not being encouraged, they're not being disciplined to study, to learn character, to having an industrious heart, to really look after themselves and prepare themselves for the future, build those habits, those systems, those neuroscience rhythms in yourself to actually understand, like my dad always told me, first work, then play. So children don't have that example. Think about crime. Think about the effect of crime. Children being poor, being hungry, are now motivated, instead of just playing and having some mischief, they now take it too far because they actually think that this is something they can do to actually alleviate the pressures at home and take some pressure off mom. They don't play, they actually become adults too soon and then don't have the moral system, they don't have the values, they don't know how to make decisions, and then overstep the line. And that's why they become juveniles. That's why they go to prisons. That's why they are exposed to even more abuse. This vicious cycle that destroys our children. And then obviously the big one is sexual activity amongst teens because of the, let's say, lack of discipline, lack of clarity, lack of sense that my life has hope. Dad is not there. There's no commitment and sense of security. Which basically just makes the whole society implode.
It's very scary if you think along those lines. Obviously, one doesn't want to say that there's a single cause for all of the world's problems. But once you delve into the research, like the issue of fatherlessness or fathers who are under pressure, not fulfilling their role for whatever reason, but is at a very high rate, it's always in the mix. It's always there as one of those components of something that is lacking. A couple of the things that you said now that just resonated with me, the whole idea about self-esteem and the lack of boundaries. I don't know the research, but I imagine that's a parental task as a unit, as a mom and a dad together, to build the self-esteem and to lay down the boundaries for children, to know that these are the guardrails. If you come too close to these boundaries, then you are going to have consequences that are not going to be in your best interest. You're going to hurt yourself. There's going to be damage, maybe lifelong. But then I also want to ask you around your personal experience. It's one thing for us to talk about this big problem out there, but the reality is that it's also a big problem in here and in here, right? So if you don't mind, if you could share a little about your own journey, because this is where I think the hope lies. Is, if we could see there's someone who's walked this road, who is walking this road, who can maybe give me a one up and say, there's a way out or there's a way up.
The way I'd like to respond to that, Ryan, is to quote Oom Dani Roo, who was one of my mentors. He said something powerful to me earlier in my life. He said, Ben, the church is not as disobedient as the church is ignorant. So I was a classic case of that. I grew up in a fairly secure and secluded context. I think I was 16 when South Africa transitioned in 1994 to the new regime.
Yeah.
So I grew up very sheltered, had a very limited exposure. As if you live in Somerset West, Stellenbosch, it's a privileged life. You systemically ignorant, and you are kept ignorant of what's going on. And I think I was, as a result of the ignorance, later in life, conditioned not to see things. In the neuroscience, there's something called the reticular activating system. We train CEOs and high performance teams to actually activate that. And basically what it does is you've got to see it, feel it, imagine it, and then all of a sudden what you'll notice is you just see it all the time. Something happens to us in our brains when we become aware of something and we feel it. And so that's also how it became more apparent to me. Sometimes we would sit in seminars like this and think, yeah, we're fine. Our family is okay. We're okay. Nothing bad's going to happen to us. But let me make it really real. Allow me a moment just to perhaps illustrate how hectic it is. So, Ryan, I know you have 2 daughters. Can you give me one of their names?
Fleur.
Fleur. Okay, so how old is Fleur now?
Fleur turned 5 recently.
Okay. I want to ask you, maybe never, but, she's likely going to get married one day, So you want your daughter Fleur to be treated the way you treat Elsa Marie, and you actually want her to feel safe, right? Because that's what you want to create, right? A world where our daughters, I also have one, to grow up protected. I have 2 sons. I also want them to get married one day to a lady or a young bride that comes from a secure and healthy family, because that sets them up. Here's the issue. Let's take your family as a hypothetical departure point. You guys, the Smit family, is not perfect. I know you guys well, but you guys aren't perfect, but you are functional, right? When you guys have a disagreement, you sort it out, you forgive each other, you have the intention to be married until, God forbid, one of you die. Yeah. There's a real, they lived happily ever after commitment being made when your wife and you committed, it said, I do. So if that's one healthy family, for every healthy family, there is 3 dysfunctional families. Now we know dysfunctional families, at the root of a dysfunctional family, there is fatherlessness. So even though a father might be there, the likelihood that that father is as ignorant as I was, or as blinded or as unaware, is very high. Yes. So, but now for one good family, one functional family, there's 3 bad ones. Things aren't going well. Mom and dad are abusive. They disagree and not resolve. They avoid conflict. And if they have conflict, it's a massive blow up. Yeah. Often there's violence. There's just brokenness. There's just decay. So even though they stay married, it's not going well. The children don't have a picture of love. They don't have a picture of forgiveness. They don't see the gospel through the marriage. They actually don't have a perspective of a dad. They just have this very broken concept. Friends, I want you to know, as you sit here today watching this, if that's your context, there is hope. I don't want you to feel what we're doing here is to say you're the problem. That, in fact, being part of a church, being part of community, being part of healthy, strong, biblical environments is to actually help you with that. But sadly, people then get divorced, right? So for every single Smit family that's healthy, there are 6 single family homes. So either only dad raises children or only mom raises the children because of divorce, because of the brokenness. So the one Smit family with 3 dysfunctional ones has already got 6 dysfunctional single family homes where there is only one parent. And then for every one Smit child, there is 2 orphans. What I'm hoping you would hear is that you would be as shocked as I was, that you and everyone listening to this really realize how if the church does nothing, this is likely going to be proliferated even further, and it's going to create a major decay. And so Don't just use this Refocus day as a day for you to come and learn, but make that resolve, that commitment in your heart to do something about this. And the way we need to start is, like Gandhi said, be the change that we want to see in this world. It needs to start with us. And so, Ryan, if you think about this, your daughters, as wonderful as they are and as innocent as they are right now, you've got a 1 to 11 likelihood that she's going to marry somebody that has your family.
At the moment.
Right now. And if we do nothing with this very big attack worldwide on families, what is going to happen to that statistics? Like we need to just be very cognizant of the fact that doing nothing calls our children and the next generation into a very high likelihood of failure. The days of being able to sit back and hope that, the church would look after my children and disciple my children, or the schools or the communities. No, it's becoming more broken and more broken and more broken. And amidst the fact that fathers are under pressure already, it's getting worse and it's getting worse. And we really have to open our eyes and see the wood, see the writing that's on the wall.
I'm a bit taken aback, actually. Not a bit, a lot, to take that all in. That does paint a grim picture, but you also spoke about there being hope. What does the road to recovery look like? Is there a hope? Saying the world needs a father as a movement. Surely you've got some answers. Where would you go even for answers? And what is that journey? What does that pathway look like towards being or becoming and sustaining a healthy family, starting with the father, of course?
The good news is that there is hope, and we are going to segue away and give you access to website links and help you to find particular actions you can take at the end of this session. You can commit. You can do something today. You don't have to have the same statistics. We can do something. Whenever there's been in the history of the Bible a group of people that were under pressure, God always raises leaders, and you are leaders. That's why you're sitting here. The mere fact that you're in this seat means that you realize that this is where you should be stepping into, and to make this practical, yes, you can start today. So you can go to the website that appears on the screen right now, www.theworldneedsafather.com, or in short, TWNAF.com. Sign up for a newsletter. You can stay in tune. You can also reach out to the offices and ask them to connect you with the local The World Needs a Father representative. So where Ben is the local representative in Stellenbosch, and any dad or mom in Stellenbosch that wants support for their family, you can contact the World Needs a Father office. They'll put you in touch with me if you were living in Stellenbosch, just to illustrate. And then you will be brought into a community where people would invite you to something called the Dad's Talk. Mm-hmm. The Dad's Talk is a fantastic experience, which I'll explain now. You can also do, as a mother, a course called the Mother Design.
Okay.
You can also do exciting experiences. Like I mentioned earlier with Gideon, my youngest son, I'm taking him through a very intentional 3-month process called The Journey. And it basically helps him transition from childhood to young adulthood. Okay. And there's a very intentional process, full of fun, lots of excursions, going on camps, and being intentional. And then there's also a dad and daughter process for the 12 to 14-year-old daughter. Okay. So where the journey focuses on a 12 to 14-year-old son, the dads and daughters process is for a 12 to 14-year-old daughter with her father. Okay. Some of the moms sitting here might think, but I don't have a husband. I'm not in that context. I'm one of those single family homes. The World Needs a Father also offers support with that very, very intentionally, because of this reality we mentioned earlier, to obviously support that. There's really amazing opportunities. Just to give an example of some of the opportunities, there's another rite of passage that happens with your child between 18 and 21. So also for dads and daughters and dads and sons at that point in time. So the World Needs a Father movement exists to help fathers lead their families and bring heaven home. It's a beautiful idea, I love the theme, bring heaven home, and
Yeah.
if we can change homes, which is the cornerstone of a healthy society, and we then make those homes successful, we're actually also strengthening the church.
Yeah.
In fact, this is a church growth strategy, because if you're sitting here and you're a pastor or you're a leader in your local church, speak to the world. It's a Father movement. We are not a church. We're a movement. So we don't intend to plant churches particularly. We come alongside existing churches, strengthening them from various denominations and basically assist them to help with fathering. So that's the next step. That's what you do if you're sitting here saying, I'd really like to do something practical.
All right, Ben. So that being the context, what should be my mindset as the father? What should that be?
Yeah, so as you think about Fleur, she's 5 years old right now. Few dads actually know what period of a child's life, from a psychological and an emotional development perspective, research is in. We know the world has evolved and grown to a point where we understand child and human development. So few fathers realize and have awareness or knowledge of what is the different stages or phases of a child's life that I need to be cognizant of as a father. And between mom and dad, who plays the predominant influence in what phase? Ignorance about this will lead you to make significant mistakes as a father. And you will basically unintentionally create woundedness in your child's life. There's trauma when a child is in a motor car accident. There's trauma. There's different trauma when a child is abused. But there is even worse trauma when the child has a psychological, emotional need that are going unmet. And it's not evident. It's not seen immediately. It's a woundedness that occur in the heart. And we as fathers, in your case with Fleur, you want to be very intentional. You don't want to remain ignorant, right? You want to do something. And so when you do a dad's talk, when you do a mother design, the moms do mother design, the dads do dad's talks. One of the things you'll learn, first 25 years of a child's life, take notice that underneath the orange bar, it speaks to mother impact years, right? So Ryan, in your case with Fleur, she's 5 years old. The first 5 years, I think she's the eldest, right?
Yes.
And then you have a younger daughter as well. Her name?
Heidi.
Heidi particularly is still very much in, both of them are still in mother impact phase, right? Very soon, between 6 and 12, that will transition to father impact phase. And so father impact phase is critical because what a dad do with his children in that period of time is forming them. It is doing something different. It's not as if mom can't. It's just dads are different. Dads are unique. And the child's development needs overlap much with what fathers men bring. And so those are more the physical attributes. Initially, it's intellectual. In the 6 to 12, it's more physical. And then something very powerful happened, which is why I'm, for example, doing this process with my youngest son. He transitions into what we call peer impact. Now, peer impact speaks to the fact that dad becomes irrelevant. Dad's car is no longer cool. Dad is no longer the only one in his life that's his hero, or her, in your case, her hero. She gravitates and wants to orientate towards a broader society where, children think we're boring. They think we are not cool. They want to engage and communicate and be with their friends. It's as if they live outward and less isolated, less internally. And there's a massive shift. And most parents then, without understanding this, for example, would be overprotective. In your case, you'd say, heck, given this context, now I'm going to stop my children from experiencing things. And so then what happens, because you maybe didn't do the 6 to 12 father impact phase well, you are now doubting whether my children has the values. Can they make the decisions? Can they avoid stepping into the wrong conditions or environments? And then you frustrate them. They are developmentally in need of social interaction outside of your home, and you restrict that. And that builds a resentment, which is unseen. Now, let me just say this. Ryan, when do you think, by the hand of the enemy, most men's careers grow and scale aggressively? Take a guess, when their children are what ages?
10?
6 to 12.
Okay.
Why? Because that's exactly when you're supposed to make your biggest impact. That's when your bonding with your child is supposed to be so intentional. What does the enemy do? He makes your career fly off and you love the success. Why? Because you are creating a future for your children. You think this is the way you should do it. You deem it as right. And you are just ignorant of this wall that you're going to hit very soon. And then when you hit it, all the money you would have made between 6 and 12, you're going to spend on issues and psychologists and problems literally very soon, because you're going to sit with teenagers that are off the rails. And that's what happens in many families. That's what actually happened in my family as well. And so before I go there, I want to share about the fact that just after the peer impact phase, there's another father impact phase. And I don't know if you remember, we were just finishing high school. You needed to make massive decisions about your life. Am I going to go study? Am I going to do a gap year? Am I going to go and work immediately and first get experience? And then there is an enormous need for dad to be present to help me make major decisions, because it will impact my identity.
Yeah.
By the way, Ryan, if I ask you to define things like identity or authority, what is that?
Well, I would say identity, I wouldn't define it with reference to myself or something within myself. I would define it with reference to the ultimate authority in my life, who is God and Christ. So whatever God says about me, that is who I am ultimately. And his authority is what I submit to and that I welcome. And there's many reasons for that. He's proven himself as a good father. So,
friends, let me ask you that question. If I ask you to turn to one another and talk to you about this concept identity, what is it? Where does it come from? How do you know you have it? If you say you've got it, what would be proof? Most of us would hesitate. Most of us would hit a small speed wobble and say, wait, I just want to Google it first.
yeah.
We go through these challenges, same with authority. One of my favorite questions with working with CEOs and business people is to ask them, so do you have authority? Then they give me an answer. I say, okay, so how do you know you've got it? How do you get it? Once you've got it, what are you supposed to do with it? Many of them just don't have those answers because they've never been defined around it. They don't understand it, and they therefore cannot manage it. If you can't define it, if you don't have handles on it, you don't know how to build it. And few fathers, few mothers know this. Few of them know how to form identity, how to teach their children to make decisions and lead themselves well. So here's a scary statement. So I would like to just read you a very powerful quote. Listen to this. People without an organized system of thought will always be at the mercy of people who have one, or at the mercy of the reigning values of society. Let me read that again. People without an organized system of thought or mindset will always be at the mercy of people who have one, or at the mercy of the reigning values of society. If I ask you to write down your 5 core values, would you be able to? Do you understand why that's important? Do you have aligned behaviors that you have well defined and thought of for yourself as a father or as a mother, or as a leader of an organization? We always do this for businesses. And I realized as a business coach one day, sitting in a dad's talk, well, I do this for businesses, but I don't even do it at home. I didn't even have it myself. And that's when I realized I'm ignorant. I am at the mercy of society, and society is going to impact me. And that's what most of us look like. Even though we sit in churches for many years, we don't understand values. We don't understand why it's important. We don't know how it forms us. We don't know how it actually impacts us. And we don't teach it to our children. We don't emphasize it. We don't repeat it. We don't, embed it in their subconscious belief systems so that from that, they make all their decisions.
Yeah.
And so let me come back to this phases of life thing, Ryan. Your life would have expanded and your business or your your work life would have taken your life to the next level, mainly because your children are between 6 and 12 years of age. And that happens because the enemy actually wants to distract you as a father.
Sure.
And so what should your mindset be? How should I then lead myself? You should, as a dad, think, how can mom and dad compromise and create an environment between the ages of 0 and 6 for my children where mom doesn't need to work so that dad provides. And then later when 6 to 12 happen, how can dad tone back on his business? How can dad be less at work and less stressed and have more emotional margin so that dad can be a dad, right? Because you need to go and watch your child's rugby. You need to go and check out your son or your daughter netball game. You need to be present in your children's life so as to play ball with them and have moments with them. And most dads and moms are ignorant of this. You then should know that during the father impact phase, yes, what we know, another big statistic is if father were faithful between 6 and 12, the likelihood that between 19 and 22, when they make their biggest decisions, they'll come back to father.
Sure.
Is very high because they have relationship. They will remember psychologically, subconsciously, they were coded by father. They were defined by father and mother. I'm not saying mom is never there. In the first few phases when it's mother impact, dad is there, but the way dad helps mom is different.
Yes.
Same with mom later during father impact. Mom is there, but father needs to be brought, more attenuated. So these are such critical mindsets, which I didn't know. And so what happened was my then 8-year-old son, Benjamin, people ask me, how did I get involved in the world as a father? The story actually goes as follows. I was a CEO of a business that grew very aggressively over a 7-year period. And during the 7-year period, my eldest son, Benjamin, exited the mother phase. So he's now 8 years old in the story. And here is what happened.
6 years ago, my father his company was at the peak of its growing.
We were at the height of my first scale up.
It was growing drastically to a point where he didn't have the capacity to cope at home and at his company as a CEO. So he was under a lot of stress.
I wasn't mature to cope with what the growth did to me as CEO, and the cracks were showing. And I didn't quite know how to lead my family well. I felt insecure about that. I felt like I couldn't see how to do that effectively. I realized I needed help. I needed to change.
I definitely saw how it impacted my relationship with my father, especially with him having outbursts because he's under so much stress and him not necessarily having the time to think.
We had 3 children in 3.5 years, so we grew our family also fairly rapidly. At that point in time of our family maturity, I came out of about 10 years occupationally employed by a church, working as a pastor, working on university campuses and working with mature students. So that was my world. I felt more and more under pressure at work to provide, and similarly had this young family at home that caused quite some stress.
Our structure at home was falling apart.
I didn't know how to do discipline proactively. I was very reactive.
So my relationship with my father at the time, it was really heated.
I remember moments of like emotional outbursts, really struggling to hold my composure and really feeling like I'm battling to not lose it.
A lot of yelling, I remember. I felt really alone, very alone in my life at that time. And I was partly scared, I'd admit, because I didn't know what to do. And I really needed a father figure
So what happens to a father when you try and achieve and you fall short, and you try and achieve and you fall short, it starts creating a fear or insecurity cycle or habit. And what then happens is it starts to define you, and you feel like this thing is bigger than me. And I felt like I was imploding on the inside, relying too much on myself, wasn't operating from a place of rest, wasn't operating from a place of know-how, and didn't properly surround myself with people that's been there, that could guide and assist to the degree necessary to actually get me through this very difficult time. I was supposed to be okay, and I wasn't. I remember the breaking point for me was returning from taking a drive with Benjamin, and we were in the car, and he was misbehaving.
That was probably when I was in grade 6. I was 12 at the time.
I think it was the 154th time I told him to please behave when I'm driving, because I'm afraid that as I drive, he distracts me and I make an accident.
I was being disrespectful toward my dad, and my dad was done. He couldn't take it anymore.
I just reached a state of deep despair and discouragement, and I broke down crying. It was as if I just couldn't take it anymore.
This was different because usually in the house at the time, he'd like yell at me.
And it was at that stage that I stopped the car and I just pulled him towards me and I said, Benjamin, I can't go on like this. Like and I was weeping, and I said to him, what you are doing breaks me.
As a child, you do things, but you don't necessarily understand the effect of what you do. And when my father actually explained that to me, it definitely reached me far better.
Yeah, so within the next 3 weeks from there, I phoned a few friends and eventually reached an appointment with Gerard van Eck. And sitting with him, he asked me 3 questions. I realized I needed some help, and he invited me to a dad's talk. And that was in November 2017.
I definitely see the effect that the World Needs a Father had over the time period that my dad actually went through it, and how his approach to discipline changed in our household.
So one of the biggest things that changed for me was my way of thinking, mindset and perspective on my children changed. Previously, they were a drain. Previously, they were just a necessary. I needed to do things that was a necessary evil to get them to mature. I really look back to that season with deep empathy. I think there are so many fathers that battle with that, and today I feel I'm not that at all. I see my children as leaders. I see my children as young but respectable people that I can learn from.
Today, my father is someone who has time for me. He's someone who acknowledges my emotions and knows how to deal with them. He's someone who I can talk to about anything. Specifically mistakes I made in the moment, because I know that he'll genuinely listen to what I have to say. And I believe that every boy should have what I have with my father.
Sure. Ben and Benjamin, thank you so much for sharing a part of your story and the journey you are on as father and son, and obviously part of your family. I think that does bring it home a lot, to me at least, to us as a group. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I really enjoyed being with you and with all of you. Thank you for being here and being the dads and moms that God called us to be. Let's be unashamedly pro-family.
Well, Ben, just before we close, you mentioned earlier about the dad's talk, what it looks like and how it then feeds into a process. Don't you want to share a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. So practically what a dad's talk entails is 21 hours of training on fathering. It teaches you the 5 foundational pillars of fathering. Number 1, manhood. So that's very important, manhood. Secondly, a father establishes authority. A father confers identity, number 3. Number 4, a father provides security, which, by the way, interestingly, is financial support, financial provision is actually less than 10% of security. You know, we are so over influenced by this, let's call it affluence that we need to achieve, that we often misjudge what security really is, which is emotional and spiritual as well. And then finally, a father affirms potential. So that's what a dad's talk teaches you. There are various formats it's being presented. Some people do a cell group format, so you can take it to your local church and do it in a cell group over 27 weeks and basically take an hour a week. If you go to the website, there is an amazing series on the website which will add to the screen just for you to be aware of, where you don't have to go do a dad's talk, wait for it. You can simply click on the videos and do the entire dad's talk with your cell group. Take it to your churches, take it to the men in your groups, and really start and engage with the material. So dad's talks are ideally done in community. You are not supposed to sit in your lounge or sit in your study and watch it all by yourself and think you're going to figure this out by yourself. Like entrepreneurship, like most things in life, this is not a solo game. It's meant to be played in community. It's meant to be played with mom. You can't do this without mom. They bring something that we can't bring.
Amen. All right. So I think we've covered what I hope we could fruitfully contribute to the day through the World Needs a Father. Just in conclusion, I want to speak to our 2023 Wilberforce Academy cohort, as well as all our guests, because we have some of you who didn't spend the time with us in January. But the focus of this day is obviously about being unashamedly pro-family. That is both living and promoting God's design. And so I think what this session really brought home to me is that to be able to promote God's design, it would be very difficult to do that unless you are in fact living it. So that's the importance of both word and deed functioning together, because that is really how we live an authentic life. That is how we witness authentically to the goodness of God, to the gospel, the impact of Christ on our lives, on our marriages, on our families, our relationships with our children. So thank you so much, Ben, because I think this is really what brings this message across for today. Thank you.